Jax's revenge domain. Pack your things now, you're done. Security will escort you out. The words cut through my headphones as 60,000 viewers watched my career implode in real time. Pierce Hamilton's face filled my monitor, his Harvard MBA smile barely hiding his satisfaction. Your outdated approach to cybersecurity is holding us back. This company needs innovation, not some 1990s thinking from someone who refuses to adapt. My name is Oliver Brennan, and until 47 minutes ago, I was Senior VP of Engineering at CyberGuard Technologies. I'm 53 years old, and I'd just been publicly humiliated in front of our biggest clients, government partners, and half the cybersecurity industry. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just 6 hours earlier, I'd been in the server room patching a critical vulnerability that could have exposed our Pentagon contracts to foreign hackers. While Pierce was preparing his PowerPoint about modernization, I was literally keeping the company's crown jewels secure. My hands stayed steady under my desk where the cameras couldn't catch them. 15 years of building this company's security infrastructure reduced to a public execution. The chat sidebar exploded with reactions, some shocked, others enjoying the corporate drama unfolding live. Your access is already terminated. HR has your final paperwork ready. Pierce glanced at his Rolex. You have 30 minutes. Anything left behind becomes company property. I stared into my webcam, knowing my expression was being broadcast to employees across 3 continents, to defense contractors who trusted our systems, to tech leaders who'd worked with me for decades. My late wife Sarah had always said I had a good poker face. Right now, I needed every bit of it. Inside, I was furious. Outside, I kept my engineer's composure. Any final words, Oliver? Pierce asked, his voice dripping with fake concern. The silence stretched as 60,000 people waited for my response. I slowly removed my security badge and placed it on my desk where the camera could capture it. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I wish CyberGuard continued success protecting our clients. Pierce's smile flickered. He'd expected me to break down, to beg, to give him the meltdown he needed to justify his decision. I didn't give him that satisfaction, even as my world collapsed. The stream ended abruptly. My screen went black, then flashed the company logo. Within seconds, my system access died mid-keystroke. 15 years of work, gone with a click. Pierce had no idea this wasn't our ending. It was just the opening move. If you're already invested in this story, stick around. What happens next will change how you think about corporate justice forever. My journey at CyberGuard began 15 years earlier when I answered a posting for a senior security architect. Back then, I was 38, fresh from a successful startup exit, with 3 cybersecurity patents and a reputation for building unhackable systems. My previous company had been acquired by Cisco for $85 million. I could have retired, but I couldn't stand the thought of sitting on a beach while hackers got smarter every day. Sarah was alive then, working as a nurse at Johns Hopkins. She understood my drive to solve problems, to build systems that protected people. We'd talk for hours about my work, her helping me think through complex security architectures while she planned her patients' care. She died 4 years ago from cancer, and our kids, Michael, 22, and Emma, 20, were both in college when this all went down. CyberGuard was struggling when I joined. Mid-size company with decent products but constant security breaches. During my interview, Pierce spoke passionately about revolutionizing enterprise security, his hands animated as he described his vision. I believed him, believed in the mission. We need someone who thinks beyond conventional wisdom, he'd said, leaning forward. Someone willing to rebuild everything from the ground up. My first creation at CyberGuard was Threat Shield, a behavioral analysis system that caught advanced persistent threats others missed. Client retention jumped 85% within 6 months. My second innovation, SecureLink, became industry standard for encrypted communications. By my 5th year, I'd built a team of 22 brilliant engineers who executed increasingly complex security architectures. We were protecting Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and critical infrastructure. The work mattered. Every vulnerability we caught, every attack we prevented, made the world a little bit safer. Pierce showcased me at investor meetings, industry conferences, and client presentations. His technical genius, he called me, his hand always finding my shoulder. I pretended not to notice how he took credit for architectural decisions he barely understood. The warning signs appeared gradually. First came separate strategy meetings I wasn't invited to, despite overseeing the products being discussed. Then came awkward interactions with colleagues who suddenly seemed uncomfortable around me. Pierce thinks we should modernize our approach became code for ignoring my technical recommendations. But the real wake-up call came during my annual performance review 3 years ago. Pierce sat across from me in his corner office, surrounded by awards for innovations I'd created. "Oliver, you're incredibly talented," he began, "but talent alone isn't enough anymore. The industry is evolving. Our clients want fresh perspectives, not just deep technical knowledge." I listened as he essentially told me I was too old, too set in my ways, too focused on actual security instead of flashy presentations. He never said it directly, HR would have had a field day, but the message was clear: make room for the next generation. That's when I started paying closer attention to the quarterly reports, to where our money was really going, to who Pierce was hiring as consultants. That's also when I started buying CyberGuard stock with every spare dollar I had. The breaking point came during the Pentagon presentation. I'd worked 16-hour days for weeks perfecting our pitch to the Department of Defense, potentially our biggest contract. The proposal included a revolutionary threat detection system that could identify foreign intrusion attempts in real time, technology I'd been developing for 3 years. 15 minutes before the meeting, Pierce texted, "Taking this one solo. Your presentation style might seem dated to government officials. Stay available in case I need technical backup." That call never came. Pentagon signed a 5-year contract worth $45 million. At the celebration, Pierce raised his glass in front of 200 employees, clients, and board members. When I first envisioned this integrated approach to government security, I knew execution would be everything. My team exchanged glances across the room. They knew whose architecture it had been, whose nights and weekends had built the system. Pierce was now claiming credit for. Ryan Mills, my lead developer, found me by the bar later that evening. "This is bullshit, Oliver," he said quietly. "Everyone knows you designed Threat Shield. You wrote the core algorithms yourself." I appreciated his loyalty, but I also knew the reality. In corporate America, the person with the title gets the credit. Technical brilliance means nothing without political positioning. That night, I made my first strategic investment, $15,000 in CyberGuard stock, purchased through my personal account. It was a substantial chunk of my savings, but watching Pierce steal credit for my life's work had crystallized something. I needed leverage beyond my technical expertise and team loyalty. Sarah had been gone 2 years by then. The house felt empty, and I found myself working even longer hours. Michael was a junior at MIT studying computer science, following in his old man's footsteps. Emma was a sophomore at Georgetown, pre-med like her mother, both kids. Tuition was eating up most of my salary, but I managed to squeeze out money for stock purchases whenever I could. As months turned to years, the pattern intensified. Pierce systematically removed me from high-visibility projects, claiming he needed to give younger engineers opportunities to grow. My team members were reassigned one by one to other departments. My budget was slashed repeatedly. My office moved from the executive floor to a smaller space near the server room. "Restructuring," Pierce explained when I confronted him about the changes. "Nothing personal, Oliver. We need to position the company for the next generation of cybersecurity challenges." But I noticed his office got bigger each time mine got smaller. Each time he undermined me, I bought more shares. Each time he claimed credit for my innovations, I increased my position. While Pierce spent his growing bonuses on a Tesla Model S, Aspen ski trips, and a downtown condo, I lived in the same modest townhouse Sarah and I had bought 20 years earlier. I drove my 12-year-old pickup truck and brown-bagged lunch most days. He never questioned why I didn't upgrade my lifestyle as my salary increased. He never wondered where my money went. His blindness to long-term thinking became my greatest advantage. The financial strategy wasn't just about accumulation. It was about understanding the company's vulnerabilities. As a major shareholder, I had access to quarterly reports, SEC filings, and audit documents that regular employees never saw. That's when I started noticing the irregularities. CyberGuard was spending heavily on external consultants, security advisors, compliance experts, and technical reviewers who supposedly provided specialized services my team couldn't handle internally. The amounts were substantial. $2.8 million over 3 years to a firm called Secure Consult Associates. I'd never heard of them, despite supposedly working on projects they were consulting on. when I asked Pierce about it. During a budget meeting, he waved dismissively. They handle regulatory compliance and government liaison work, Oliver, high-level strategic stuff that's outside your wheelhouse. That bothered me. I'd been handling government contracts since before Pierce graduated business school. Why would we need external consultants for work I'd been doing successfully for over a decade? Late one night, I decided to dig deeper. Secure Consult Associates had a basic website with generic cybersecurity stock photos and vague service descriptions. Their office address was a mail drop in Delaware. Their phone number connected to a voicemail that was never returned. But the real revelation came when I cross-referenced their incorporation papers with Pierce's emergency contact information. Secure Consult Associates had been registered by Marcus Hamilton, Pierce's older brother who worked in real estate development in Florida. I sat in my home office at 2 a.m. staring at the documents spread across my desk. Pierce wasn't just taking credit for my work, he was stealing from the company, and he'd been doing it systematically for years. The next morning brought more disturbing discoveries. 2 other consulting firms on our vendor list, Tech Strategy Partners and Compliance Solutions LLC, had similar red flags. Fake addresses, disconnected phone numbers, and incorporation papers linked to Pierce's college roommate and his former business school study partner. Over the next 6 months, I quietly documented everything: bank transfers, consulting agreements, project deliverables that were never delivered, and invoice approvals that bypassed normal procurement processes. The total came to $3.2 million diverted to these shell companies over 4 years. Pierce had created an elaborate scheme to funnel company funds to his personal network while systematically removing me from positions where I might notice the discrepancies. Every time he claimed I was outdated or out of touch, he was really protecting his criminal enterprise. The day everything changed began normally enough. I arrived at the office early as usual and spent the morning reviewing security logs from our government clients. A routine quarterly board meeting had been mysteriously upgraded to an all-hands live stream called CyberGuard Future Vision with mandatory attendance for all employees. I logged in from my desk around 9 a.m., noting the unusually high viewer count, 60,000 people including employees, clients, vendors, and industry observers. Pierce spent 40 minutes outlining aggressive expansion plans, repeatedly using phrases like next-generation leadership and innovative thinking. Watching him present his vision for the company's future, a vision built on stolen innovations and fraudulent consulting contracts, I felt a cold clarity settle over me. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, even if I hadn't known it at the time. Then Pierce looked directly into the camera and said the words that would change everything. But first, we need to make some personnel adjustments to position ourselves for this exciting future. That's when Pierce turned his attention to me specifically. Oliver Brennan has been with us for 15 years, he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. He's contributed significantly to our technical foundation, but as we look toward the future, we need leadership that can adapt to rapidly changing market conditions. I felt my stomach drop. This was it. The public execution I'd somehow sensed was coming. Pack your things now. You're done. Security will escort you out. The words that started this story hit me like a physical blow. Your outdated approach to cybersecurity is holding us back. This company needs innovation, not some 1990s thinking from someone who refuses to adapt. The chat exploded with reactions. Former colleagues typing furiously, competitors probably taking notes, government clients watching their trusted point of contact get humiliated in real time. Your access is already terminated. HR has your final paperwork ready. You have 30 minutes. Anything left behind becomes company property. I kept my composure, said my piece about wishing the company success, and watched Pierce's smile flicker when I didn't break down. The stream ended abruptly, and within seconds, my computer access died. Security appeared at my desk within minutes. 2 guards who looked as uncomfortable as I felt. Mark and Luis, guys I'd chatted with every morning for years. They watched silently as I packed 15 years of my professional life into a cardboard box. Family photos including my last picture with Sarah. Technical manuals I'd authored. The coffee mug Emma had given me that said "World's Best Dad" in faded letters. Colleagues avoided eye contact as I walked the hallway toward the elevator. Some typed frantically on their phones, probably updating LinkedIn profiles, fearing they might be next. Ryan Mills caught my eye from across the open workspace and gave me a subtle thumbs up, his way of saying he'd remember who really built the systems keeping CyberGuard alive. Outside, November rain soaked through my jacket as I waited for my Uber. 15 years of 60-hour weeks, breakthrough innovations, and loyal service, ending with me standing alone on a curb, holding a cardboard box containing the remnants of my career. The drive home was a blur. I kept replaying Pierce's words, the shocked comments in the chat, the faces of my team as their leader was publicly destroyed. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from former colleagues, recruiters, and industry contacts who'd watched the spectacle unfold. That evening, I sat in my home office watching CyberGuard stock dip 18% in after-hours trading. The termination news had leaked beyond company walls. Tech blogs were already running stories about the shakeup at CyberGuard. Industry forums buzzed with speculation about what this meant for the company's government contracts. I ignored the flood of sympathetic messages and focused on the shareholder registry that would update at midnight. All those years of careful stock accumulation were about to pay off in ways Pierce couldn't imagine. At precisely 9:23 p.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Good evening, Oliver," said a gravelly voice with a slight southern accent. "This is Gerald Montgomery, chairman of the board. I just heard what happened today. Completely unacceptable." Gerald Montgomery. I knew the name from board meeting minutes and annual reports, but we'd never spoken directly. Pierce had always insisted on being the sole point of contact between the board and company operations. "Thank you for your concern," I replied carefully, wondering how much he actually knew about Pierce's decision. "I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning," Gerald continued. "Would you be available to join us, say 10 a.m. Eastern?" The question hung in the air. Board meetings weren't typically open to terminated employees, which meant Gerald knew something Pierce didn't expect him to know. "I'd be happy to participate," I said. "Is there anything specific I should prepare? Just bring your perspective on the company's technical direction and recent leadership decisions. I think the board would benefit from your insights." As I ended the call, my phone immediately buzzed with a text from Pierce. "Minor communication issue today. Let's discuss privately before things escalate. Breakfast tomorrow? My treat." I stared at his message, noting the careful language. Communication issue, not termination, not restructuring, just a minor issue that could be smoothed over with coffee and pastries. A second text arrived 5 minutes later. "The board is asking questions. We should align our messaging before anyone gets the wrong impression." Then a third. "Oliver, I know you're upset, but we can work this out. No need for this to become adversarial." By 11 p.m., Pierce had sent 6 increasingly desperate messages, each one revealing more desperation than the last. He'd clearly been caught off guard by Gerald's call and was scrambling to control a narrative that was already slipping away from him. I set my phone on the kitchen counter and smiled for the first time since the live stream. Pierce thought this was still about hurt feelings and wounded pride. He had no idea that Gerald had called me first, or why the board chairman would be interested in the perspective of a supposedly outdated engineer. That's because Pierce didn't know about the 19% of CyberGuard stock I'd accumulated over the past 8 years. Stock that made me the second largest individual shareholder after the founders. Stock that gave me rights and access Pierce had never bothered to understand. I spent the night preparing for the board meeting, organizing technical reports, client feedback, and financial documents that would paint a very different picture than the one Pierce had been presenting. Most importantly, I gathered evidence of the consulting fraud I'd been documenting. Bank transfers, fake companies, and family connections that would expose Pierce's criminal enterprise. Sleep came in brief intervals. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw 60,000 viewers watching my professional execution. Each time I dozed, I heard Pierce's voice. "Pack your things now." But alongside the humiliation, I felt something else growing. Anticipation. Pierce had made a catastrophic miscalculation. He'd assumed his MBA and executive title made him untouchable. He'd never bothered to understand the technical systems that actually ran the company, or the financial structures that governed it. Most fatally, he'd underestimated the patience and strategic thinking of the engineer he'd spent years undermining. Tomorrow's board meeting wouldn't just be about my termination. It would be about Pierce's future and his past. At precisely 9:55 a.m., I connected to the video conference. One by one, board members appeared on screen. 11 people whose names I knew from annual reports, but whom I'd rarely interacted with directly. Pierce had always insisted on being the filter between the board and technical staff. "There he is," Gerald said warmly when my video connected. "Thank you for joining us, Oliver." Pierce's face appeared last, his expression mixing surprise and barely controlled anger when he spotted me. He'd clearly expected to control this conversation. "I believe there's been a miscommunication," Pierce began immediately, his voice tight. "Oliver's termination was a standard performance decision based on strategic realignment. It doesn't require board intervention." "His performance issues?" Gerald interrupted, raising his eyebrows. "I've reviewed our technical metrics for the past 8 years, Pierce. Every major security breakthrough that built our reputation came from Oliver's team. Every system failure happened after you moved him away from core projects." Pierce's confident smile flickered. "With respect, Gerald, you're seeing correlation, not causation. Our technical success came from my strategic direction and overall vision. Oliver's a competent engineer, but he lacks the broader perspective needed for senior leadership." "Enough," said Patricia Stone, the retired founder of SecureNet Industries and our longest-serving board member. The live stream termination was completely inappropriate regardless of performance. 60,000 viewers, Pierce. Our stock is down 18% and 3 major clients have called expressing concerns. "A temporary market reaction," Pierce dismissed, waving his hand. "It'll stabilize once I announce our modernization strategy next week. The market understands that difficult personnel decisions are sometimes necessary for growth." "Which brings us to why we're here," Gerald said, turning to face me directly. "Oliver, you've been uncharacteristically quiet. What's your perspective on the company's direction?" Pierce leaned forward, interrupting before I could speak. "With respect, Gerald, Oliver is no longer with the company. His input on strategic matters isn't relevant to board discussions." "Actually," Gerald said, his voice taking on a steel edge, "Oliver owns 19% of outstanding shares, making him our second-largest individual shareholder. His perspective is extremely relevant to any strategic discussion." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Pierce's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then dawning comprehension as he processed this revelation. Several board members pulled up documents on their tablets confirming Gerald's statement. "That's impossible," Pierce finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "The registry updated last night," Gerald confirmed. "Which is why I called this emergency meeting. Oliver, the floor is yours." All eyes turned to me. 15 years of being overlooked, interrupted, and dismissed had prepared me for this moment. I straightened in my chair and began, speaking with the confidence of someone who owned nearly a fifth of a billion-dollar company. "Pierce's expansion plan is technically flawed," I said, my voice calm and measured. "The acquisition targets he selected have incompatible security architectures that would create vulnerabilities, not synergies. The international markets he's targeting lack the regulatory framework to support our government contracts." I shared my screen and presented the technical analysis I'd prepared, showing how Pierce's strategy would actually weaken our security posture while dramatically increasing costs. The board leaned forward, engaged in ways they hadn't been during Pierce's earlier presentations. "This is ridiculous," Pierce interrupted, his composure finally cracking. "He was terminated yesterday. He doesn't have access to current strategic data or client requirements. I'm presenting based on quarterly reports available to all shareholders," I replied calmly. "The same reports you presented to investors last month, taking credit for security innovations you had me removed from developing." "You're making this personal," Pierce snapped. "Exactly," I agreed. "Which is why I'm requesting a full audit of financial decisions made during Pierce's tenure, particularly regarding external consulting contracts." I pulled up the documentation I'd been gathering for months. Secure Consult Associates, Tech Strategy Partners, Compliance Solutions LLC. Shell companies that had received $3.2 million in payments over 4 years for services never delivered. "These consulting firms share several interesting characteristics," I continued. "They have no legitimate business addresses, their phone numbers connect to voicemail systems that are never answered, and their incorporation papers link directly to Pierce's family members and college associates." The conference call went dead quiet. Gerald opened his folder and began scanning the financial documents I'd shared. Other board members pulled up, Their own copies, cross-referencing the data with company records. Pierce's face had gone from flushed to pale. "These are serious allegations," Gerald said, his voice grave. "These aren't allegations," I corrected. "These are documented facts. The forensic accounting team I hired confirmed everything yesterday." "You hired a forensic accounting team?" Patricia asked. "As a major shareholder exercising my fiduciary responsibilities," I replied. "The findings show systematic diversion of company funds disguised as legitimate consulting expenses." "This is a calculated smear campaign," Pierce finally exploded. "Oliver's trying to secure his position by destroying mine with fabricated evidence and conspiracy theories." "Actually," said Angela Foster, our CMO, "the consulting contracts Oliver's identified were always puzzling to me. We never saw any deliverables from these firms, despite paying them substantial fees for security analysis and compliance work. The next hour was the most satisfying of my career." As board members dug deeper into Pierce's financial decisions, the pattern became undeniable. He'd been systematically stealing from the company while taking credit for innovations that weren't his. By noon, Pierce had been terminated for cause and escorted from the building by actual security. Not the gentle kind I'd received, but the kind reserved for suspected criminals. The board unanimously appointed me interim CEO with a mandate to stabilize operations and rebuild client confidence. 6 months later, I was sitting in Pierce's former office, now mine, reading news reports about his indictment on federal fraud charges. The SEC investigation had uncovered additional schemes, including stock manipulation and tax evasion. He was facing 15 years in federal prison. CyberGuard's stock had not only recovered but reached all-time highs under my leadership. We'd landed 2 new government contracts worth $78 million combined. Industry analysts called our turnaround one of the most impressive corporate recoveries they'd seen. Michael had graduated from MIT and joined our engineering team. Emma was accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School, following her mother's path. Both kids were proud of their old man's unexpected second act as CEO. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something better from the ashes of what tried to destroy you. Pierce hadn't just lost his job and freedom. He'd lost any claim to the innovations that defined CyberGuard's success. History would remember him as the fraud who nearly destroyed a great company. And me? I'd be remembered as the engineer who saved it. Patience beats aggression. While Pierce focused on quick wins and flashy presentations, Oliver played the long game, accumulating shares, documenting evidence, and building unshakable technical credibility that ultimately mattered more than corporate politics. True value always surfaces. In a world obsessed with youth and trends, experience and genuine expertise don't become obsolete. They become more valuable when crisis hits and companies need leaders who actually understand how to build and protect what matters.